Okay, can we jump to Jaz? And welcome and thank you. Thank you so much for starting us off in the right spirit this evening.
Can those of you using speakers hear me all right?
Yes. You have frozen for a moment.
Great. Yeah, so thanks for having me here too. Well, I'll start off by just telling you all a bit about myself. I'm a two-spirit artist, former foster kid, living with chronic illness and working as an interdisciplinary artist, primarily within the mediums of literary art, paint, and plant life. I try to center community care and ancestral connections and cutie BIPOC relief in my work. I live semi-nomadically along the unceded west coast of Turtle Island, as well as the interior of so-called British Columbia in Canada. My ancestry ties me to Scotland, as well as unceded Sakatmahulu, which extends from the Columbia River Valley on the east slope of the Rocky Mountains to the Fraser River on the west, and from the upper Fraser River in the north to the Arrow Lakes in the south. But the bulk of my work and my art practice blooms within the unceded territories of the Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Musqueam nations, or in so-called Vancouver, British Columbia, Canada, where I've been overwhelmed with warm-heartedness and generosity and support of host nations and the indigenous community. I just wanted to give a special thank you to Q for inviting me here today, as well as a thank you to any other folks who took part in organizing this event, and of course to the interpreters and describers for their work. I've just been asked to open up the event, and we're gathered here against the proposed this topic has just gotten a lot more personal for me in the past less than a week, just in the past few days. The timing for being asked to be here is very strange, but I'm thankful nonetheless. These problematic changes to MAiD policy will inevitably have a considerable and disproportionate impact on Black and Indigenous communities in so-called Canada, where current legislation does not provide an adequate standard or quality of life for Black and Indigenous disabled people and others living with chronic illness. From my perspective, these proposed amendments are woefully lacking in consideration regarding the current living conditions in many long-term care facilities, as well as the living conditions of Black and Indigenous communities that have been even further deteriorated since the beginning of the ongoing pandemic. From my perspective, these amendments are essentially the equivalent of state-sanctioned genocide of primarily Black and Indigenous disabled folks whose chronic conditions are continuously exacerbated by the neglect and underfunding of our communities. It really doesn't take much research as well as across the globe suffer from substantially higher numbers of chronic illness than other communities, and we're no stranger to the idea of genocide, and that the state does not care for us and disregards our health at every chance they get. From the mistreatment and neglect of Black and Indigenous folks in medical facilities and the lack of assistance disabled folks receive on a regular basis to continue living, to the more blatant and widespread human rights violations across so-called Canada. From over 100 different Indigenous communities with no potable water, to the violent forced entry into our territories and communities to expand harmful resource extraction projects that greatly impact our health. The health not only of our human relatives, but also the relatives across the land, including the plants, animals, waterways, and so forth, on which we rely heavily upon to fulfill our responsibility of maintaining the reciprocal health and well-being of everything around us. I believe there's a considerable threat to our communities when the state is ready to pass a bill that shows they would more readily ask us if we would consider death over upholding their responsibility to take care of the community colonial systems continue to take power and autonomy away from. I don't have much info on who was considered during the consultation process, but I have no doubt that the majority of folks involved were upper middle class and white disabled folks who do not have much insight into what it's like to often be born into deplorable conditions on top of being disabled. And I also have no doubts that if there were Indigenous so-called leaders or the folks at the various health authorities, Indigenous health authorities, if they were involved in the process, that they also have little understanding or care for the folks whose lives they're creating policy for. Canada as a state and its historically racist and ableist medical systems have never been shy about leaving us behind or sweeping us under the rug. And this time it's no different, which is why we have to demand reconsideration. Yeah. Guess I have some poetry that I thought I might share. I recently did, as I said earlier, I work within the literary arts community here in so-called Vancouver, as well as across Canada, I suppose. And I recently did a collaboration with a called Solomon Chinikwe. Where he took photos and he sent the photos to me, and I was able to make poetry from looking at those photos. And I'll just read a few of those now. I'll come home as long as I can find permission to be in an endless state of leaving. My indigeneity may not be palatable to you, but there's no need for it to be. No need to document me. I'll be gone on the wind. Ancestors who whisper into dark shadows, glass panes reflect urban identities, big, wide indigeneity. I finally found the words to say, but you always have your back to me. All the words that mean home, lean home, nostalgia, you know I smell you, mildew and lice shampoo, Get it? Sun sneaks through the curtains like a summer day, but it's so damn cold I can still see my breath. Peek outside and sun shines even off the dirtiest snow. Water out of the tap looks like the water in a big old pothole. Cluttered countertops and overwatered plants in pots. And the drain's clogged again. Dead trees, dirty knees, and the cold always calls you home. Little res kid walking, head held high, pants too long, they drag under my heels. Soaked wet pant cuffs, shoes and socks dripping chilly. Scrapes from jumping fences higher than I could climb. But you never know how high until you go that high. The dogs on the res wag their tails and whine at the smell of anything hot out of the oven. The storms have been worse ever since show up. The thunder echoes the sound of the ancestors and dirty tap water. It's spam and deer meat. Auntie's home and Auntie's missing. Jesus cross and medicine wheel. Bolo ties and beaded medallions. It's pine after telephone pole. Bone knife, paper plate. Vast plains and cousins in cages. So that's what I'll share today. The stories that I'm on right now of the Musqueam have some protocols that say when you invite people together, you're expected to give a gift or you continue on. I would invite you all, wherever you are, to try and, as difficult as it can be during this time, and all the time, honestly, to understand different nations' protocols around occupying their territories and whatnot. That, yeah, I would invite you to try your hardest to find out what those protocols may be and try and live them in your lives day to day. And yeah, just want to thank you all again for being here. And that's all I have today.
Thank you so much, Jaz. That is, you bring us a very, very beautiful gift, and we thank you for that. And I know how hard this work is for anyone, but I think especially hard when you have to explain so many layers of history and trauma and pain and injustice. And you've done so with an open heart, and thank you for that gift. And yes, we will. I hope all of us honor the request that you have made. Thank you. So once again, I think, yes, other people, please express your thanks in the chat window for Jaz if you are so moved and able.